This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net and Avoid the Maze. And today my guest is Tom Glaser, and Tom is going to talk to us about how to live with a happy heart, like fulfill your living. I know so many of us, when we're asked, how are you doing? First thing we go is, well, and I did that to Tom. Well, it's colder today than it was yesterday. Are we being negative? We being positive? And, how can we enjoy those dips in our life? So welcome, Tom.
Thank you so much for having me. And I was going to say, on the other hand, I find myself like my pat answer is good. I'm good. Like I'm not necessarily answering the question, right? I'm not always really honest. So it can go either way, right?
Right. Exactly. I work IT on the weekends, and I walk into this big box store and everybody, hi Karen, how are you? Haven't seen you since last week. And I'm already drained from the week. Now, once I start working, I get my energy back and I'm fine. But walking in the store, it's like, stop with all the enthusiasm, please. But tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get from point A, wherever that was, to at least point B, where you're saying, hey, if we don't walk around in a happy mood or find the happiness, life could be a real drag.
Yes. Well, first of all, I wonder if I should address that last point first. Let me say, first of all, I'm a psychologist. So I come, and that's my whole career. So more than 30 years. So I've been doing psychotherapy, individual and group and couples and all kinds of different environments. And let's see, I'm an animal lover. My dog Rex is almost always right by my side. I'm a gardener. I love the desert. I'm based in Minneapolis, but I love the Southern California desert in particular. So I spend as much time out there as possible. That's a little bit about me. How did I get here, you asked? Gosh, I mean, it's a long slog. In a nutshell, how I came upon my book, Full Heart Living, which is what you really want to focus on,
right?
Is the truth is it came out of the unhappiest period of my adult life. And this gets at that point that I almost started with a moment ago. People who live with happier people don't experience fewer hardships than the rest of us. That's the truth, right? Life is a mixed bag. Right. It's a mixed salad. Happier people approach difficult and challenging times differently than less happy people. What I see is less happy people are trying to avoid or shove or push down, suppress, whether it's a mood or a part of a day or a larger experience. They don't want to suffer, and who can blame them, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I don't blame them. I don't want to suffer either. And suffering is a part of life. That is all, both are true. We don't really want it. It's not pleasant. And it's there. So what do we do? People who try to avoid it end up being flat. Because if you're going to push down all the sadness, all the anger, anything that's quote unquote bad, you also end up, there's a parallel. You also end up pushing down the good times.
Sure.
And so everything just gets flat and people get depressed. How did I come to all this though? Again, back to your question. So the truth is, through the unhappiest period, Karen, of my own adult life, I had my dream job. I worked at a college, and so I was working with these really bright young people, doing the psychotherapy stuff that I adore, and that I still do to this day. I also got to teach. So this other love of mine is teaching, and not just any kind of teaching. I got to teach stuff about really relevant wellness promotion activities. So stuff I'm passionate about. So
sure.
It was like perfect job for me, dream job. I was going to retire. I was attached. You know how we get attached as human beings? My plan. I had a plan. I'm going to retire at this job. I could do this job the rest of my working life. So for 7 years, it was a great job. I couldn't wait to wake up in the morning and get to work every day, until one day things changed. A new coworker showed up who this person and I did not see eye to eye. I tried everything I could to make it work. And half my job was paired very closely with this person, a very small team. I couldn't avoid this person. And I just got more and more miserable. This person was manipulative, made things worse, tried to, make me look really bad. It was a terrible situation. I got depressed because it was a grief, right? I was
Sure.
grieving my job that I loved. Dream job is a nightmare now. My dream job is now a nightmare. At least half of it was. I ended up quitting my job. And so a huge loss. And in my grief, I noticed, Karen, really happy people all around me. Like from someone I was in a play with to the person who was in the office next door to me in my private practice. And and my hairstylist, he's amongst there. He's super happy. I got really curious. First of all, I observed. I just watched. What are they doing that I'm not doing? Then I started asking questions. Well, it snowballed into this video project. So I videotaped formal interviews, and that led me to my book. And then for those who are watching with the visual, I'll show the cover of my book, Full Heart Living: Conversations with the Happiest People I Know. So this is, in a nutshell, that's how I came to all this. Yeah, I think I should pause there and check in with you. What are you thinking?
I love that. Yeah. So for those listening, many of us have situations very similar to the one you went through.
Yes.
Whether it be at their dream job or their job that they have to go to every single day.
Yes.
And it's very easy for those of us on the outside looking in to say, you know what, avoid that person as much as you can. If you need to go to work or you love to go to work, then do it and sort of put on blinders. But it's not that easy because as individuals, we still see around those blinders. And because of that, we become miserable, but we see this whole audience of people still happy, going along, doing what they want to do. And I love the fact that you started observing what is that person doing that makes them happy.
Yes.
And what is it that I'm not doing to get back to where I was?
Exactly.
So your interviewing and creating the book is very similar to many of us who are podcasting. We have that empty pit in our stomach that just isn't getting fulfilled. And by sharing each other's stories, we start to learn that, wow, okay, if Tom can do this, what is it that I can do? I don't have to go out and interview and write the book.
Right.
But what can I do?
Exactly.
So first of all, what made you decide to say, hey, I'm going to go start interviewing these people?
Well, oh my gosh, it's sort of creative inspiration, which you almost can't define, right? So the truth is, so my first love was acting. I thought I was going to be an actor when I was young. That was really my big first professional dream. And I gave that up during college when I got scared that I couldn't maybe support myself, financially as an actor. But again, in the midst of this depression, one of my coping mechanisms was to get back into things that I knew brought me joy. So I was getting more back into acting, and I hired an acting coach, an on-camera acting coach. And it was, this was when, the availability of cameras and stuff was more to the masses.
Right.
So it was easier to do things like this. And I just came away from one of my acting coaching sessions going, well, I could do that. And Bill, I know Bill can help me. So I don't, how to, it's just creative burst of inspiration. This is something I want to do. I can, I know how to ask people questions and listen well.
Sure.
I could do that. And I just like, oh, and here's another thing. It reminds me of another thing, Karen. Happier people do take more risks, right? So it's a risk.
Absolutely.
It's a risk to interview people, right? And to think about doing some, mini documentaries. I was like, what have I got to lose? I'm not happy in my job. If it doesn't work out, so what? Maybe I'll never, show them to anybody else, but I'll have fun doing it.
Well, and you know what? The interesting part is what you were going to do wasn't going to hurt anybody.
Right.
Okay. In
Yes.
fact, if they agreed to be interviewed, it may be very um, self-helpful to them
Exactly.
because they're not going to like start regurgitating everything that they've been holding in for a while.
Yes.
Um, and so we all sort of benefit from it.
Yes.
The hardest part is taking that first step because
Right.
I don't know about you, but I often hear these little voices in my head, especially before my first podcast of the day. Who
Yes.
do you think you are? Why do
Exactly.
you think you can do this?
Yes.
Who's going to listen to this podcast?
Yes.
And I basically have to say to myself, I need those words in my ear because that's going to make me sit down at the console, be prepared,
Mhm,
and go ahead and do the podcast. And
mhm.
if no one listens, well, it's still out there for the universe.
Exactly. Right. Yes. So especially Westerners have those kinds of negative self-talk, negative messages. I'm not so sure in other, more Eastern-based cultures. In fact, do you remember hearing about the Dalai Lama?
Yes.
He,
Yeah.
who at first couldn't understand the concept of self-hatred. He's like, "What are you talking about?" Like he had to really, and he's a brilliant man, right?
Right.
So he's from a different tradition, different culture where
Sure.
it's not so endemic. But in our culture, yeah, we learn to hate ourselves because capitalism is driven, right? And I mean, there's many reasons, but this is a way I often say it, right? We need to have the shiny white teeth, right? We need to have the good smelling breath. We need to have the body that looks this way, the car that looks that way, all the stuff. We're that's what we're taught. And that implicitly tells us that we're not okay. Yes.
Absolutely.
And so, right, again, unhappy or less happy people try to suppress all that. More happy people go, oh, I have this, like we wake up to it. Oh, I have that tendency. Yeah, those doubts come up. And then it's a choice. Do I need to listen to it? Or do I honor? Oh, yeah, what is that telling me? Oh, I'm scared. Yeah, this is doing a podcast, especially the first one. That's hard. It's new. I'm stretching myself. Does that mean I shouldn't do it? No. What does it's like to me? It's the insides are saying I need something. Hello, breathe a little more deeply. Um,
Exactly.
hug yourself. Tell yourself you're going to be okay. Call your best friend who will say, "Oh, that's nonsense. Don't listen to those words. You're great. You can do this." All those things. Find ways to reassure yourself. So you're not ignoring it. You're not saying no. You're saying, "Oh yeah, that's coming up." And what else? And then here's the great thing, Karen, that begins to rewire the brain in
Yes.
time. Now, will it totally take it away? Probably not. I don't know anyone that's true for. The thoughts still may arise, but they may not arise so quickly. They may not arise so often. They may not take so much time or attention. But I mean, so what the heck?
I totally agree. You know, I am learning the more people that I talk to,
Yeah.
how much we all have in common.
Yes.
There once was a time that if somebody said, Karen, I'm going to introduce you to Tom, and then we're sitting in a room
Yeah.
and okay, you are just Tom and I'm just Karen.
Yeah.
But then you tell me that you're a psychologist.
Mhm.
And then in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, he had to learn all these things. He went to college for this long. Oh, he's in private practice. And my own mind takes over. Well, what do I have in common with Tom?
Mhm.
You know,
Oh, you can do that thing where you put me up.
right.
I'm on a pedestal. Because I got a degree and a license.
Yep. And that's what our society has taught us, you know.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and so for a long time, that's exactly how I interacted with people, you know,
Mm.
like,
From a one down position. And that's no good, right? That doesn't
right.
serve anybody. It doesn't help. It doesn't help me and it doesn't help you. I love that you're bringing this up. And I do the same thing. Of course,
Well, we all
there.
do. And
Yes.
the
Yes.
reason it's so important for our listeners to hear,
Mhm.
I'm doing a podcast with a woman who has so much experience. She's been, you know, around the world and back, and she's been in TV and radio, and all of a sudden now we're doing this podcast, and because I know all these credentials,
Yeah.
I'm finding it very strange that she's really looking up to me.
Mm.
And but I had to listen to why that was.
Yeah.
And as she said, I've never done a podcast before. I don't understand the real difference between a podcast and a radio talk
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
Um, and so as I
You,
started educating her,
you had something for her.
yeah, it was like, wait a second, we can now get at the same level because you've got
Yes.
things that I don't have, but
Yeah.
I have things that you don't have. Oh, wow. Guess what?
Yes.
But it takes a lot of searching inside ourselves
Yes.
to be able to say, yes, I'm good
Well,
enough.
a couple of things. You were intimidated.
Right?
But you did, again, you didn't shove it down. You now, oh, intimidation's coming up. Oh, there it is, right? Curious. You hear my voice. It's neutral. It's not, oh, defeated. Oh, isn't that something? This is really coming up. And what I think, if I heard you right, you asked her, why? You got, again, and that takes courage. That's brave. A lot of people won't ask those questions. Asking the question is brilliant. It seems like you're kind of looking up to me. What's that about? Then you got this information. And like, oh, this is your first time. You would never have guessed she had never been on a pause. With all her experience, she's new too. She's feeling intimidated. There's things
Right.
she doesn't know. All of a sudden, the playing field is level. You can just show up person to person, heart to heart, right? Again, that's why I called the book Full Heart Living. Happier people come from the heart. They do exactly what you did. They find a way to relate to people, heart to heart, human to human. We have so much more in common than what separates us.
And that's why our society, as far as I'm concerned, should be more inclusive because we do have so much in common. When I think about living with a full heart,
Yeah.
on one end of that spectrum, it's like you said in the beginning, well, I've got to be happy all the time. I have to appreciate everything in my life. And there can never be a black cloud hanging over my head. But you also said that we have to go through those dark times in order to see the brightness.
Yes.
And I remember my father one day making a comment about, so why do you think life is so bad for you? Because I was a young kid, probably teenager, you know, going through the angst of something. And I said, because everybody else has it better. And I started naming all these people. He said, really? He said, have you ever been a fly on the wall in their house? Are they always happy? Do they get everything they want from their parents? Do they really get straight A's? And he went through everything with me. And my comment as a young kid was, well, of course they do. He said, no, of course they don't. You don't know what's going on behind their locked doors. And many, many years coming forward, I went to my 20th high school reunion, and people are talking to me like I was their best friend. And it was like, I don't remember this, but I embraced it because it was like, that was a different time. I can do this today. So a lot of that is we have to be mindful of what's going on around us.
Exactly.
because we create some of those terrible situations for ourselves.
Yes. You were projecting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
to use a psychological term, and I try to avoid that, but sometimes it's helpful to have this shorthand, right?
Sure.
Your own goodness you saw out there, and all their badness you introjected, you put that onto you. Again, it's not just you, we all do this, particularly teenagers. It's right, there's the hormones and the brain development, there's so much going on. Very easy to have a perception that is not as accurate. And so I love what you're saying. Yes, mindfulness helps us wake up to the truth, what's really going on, as best we can, because we're always projecting a little bit.
So when you started these interviews, did you really think that you were going to put this book together based on the interviews, or was it, hey, I'm just going to do this? And
no, here's what happened. I love this story. Thank you for asking. So first day of filming, I'm on a break. I'll never forget. We were filming in my own home. I'm on the back porch. It was a beautiful spring day. And here's the thing. I had known it kept coming to me for years, Karen, that I was going to write a book someday, but I didn't know what it was going to be about. I had no clue, but I'm like, I just knew that it kept coming to me. You're going to write a book. You're going to write a book. I'm like, okay, whatever. On break, that first day of filming these interviews with the happiest people I know, I go, oh, this is what I'm going to write my book about, because I could do this day in and day out, because it was one of the happiest days of my own life, sitting around with happy people, talking about what makes them click, what makes them happier. Like, it's contagious, right? That's the thing. Being around happy people and just their presence boosts people's spirits. That's true. But you take it as to another level when you explicitly talk about it. What makes you happy? What do you do? What would you suggest other people do? That it brings it to a whole nother level. Yeah. So that's how I knew I was going to write my book. And from there, of course, now writing a book is no easy task, right? Again, it wasn't all just joy and flow. And I mean, there were moments of joy and flow in writing, but writing's hard. And I'm not a trained writer. I've gotten better, but so a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. But it's one of the hardest things I've ever done is to write a book. And I'm so glad I did it, because like we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. Probably.
Exactly. And, to our listeners, what Tom and I are doing right now has nothing to do really with Tom's credentials or mine.
Right.
We are just two human beings on this round globe that keeps turning and spinning. Yeah. And we too can get lost.
Oh, yeah.
Either for the moment or for the day or even longer. But it's up to us to either ask to take somebody's hand and have them guide us, or to pull ourselves up on our own. And I love what you said, that those thoughts are going through your head, but you have to pick and choose which ones to listen to.
We have a choice.
And it's not easy. So no. If people are out there listening thinking, oh, okay, well, Tom did it. He had, a psychology background and whatever. Well, not every psychologist is going to be able to get themselves out of that deep, dark hole either.
Oh, no.
They're human.
We're just people. Yes.
And you can have all the training in the world.
Correct.
And you know how to use that with your clients. But sometimes we don't know how to use it for ourselves.
Correct.
So I want to take a step back and talk about you're doing the thing that you love the most, but now there's this one person in the mix who just grates at you and you can't go forward. Knowing what you know today, could you have done something different to have remained doing what you loved back then?
Oh, I think about that all the time. It's a great question. And I guess I have a mixed answer. I'm going to give you both a yes and a no, right?
Okay.
So it turns out 2 or 3 years after I left, that person left. So could I have waited 2 or 3 years? I sometimes wonder. I don't think I could have though. See, as soon as I said that out loud, I'm like, no, I was miserable. I was so unhappy. Like I needed, it wasn't good for me and it wasn't good for my family. Here's the thing. The moment I knew I had to quit my job was actually, I'll never forget. So there's this restaurant downtown Minneapolis, Hell's Kitchen. Great food, it was such a great place. I don't even know if it's there anymore. You know, so many things have closed with COVID. I'm having brunch with my husband and I'm telling him the latest escapade with this difficult coworker. And he's like, he goes, Tom, he just stops me. He just interrupts me. He's, Tom, you gotta leave. He told me, so that, you know, the one person who knows me the most in
Sure.
life, and he's seen me struggle for 3 years. He's like, this is making me miserable. It's making you miserable and it's making me miserable. You can't keep doing this. You've got to leave. He told me point blank, which is very rare that anyone tells someone to quit their job, right? Really, It's like, it's my decision, and it still was my decision, but it really woke, I needed someone to be that strong at that moment. Because I like, this is why I said I was attached. I wanted to stay my plan was to retire at this job. And I still miss parts of the job. But I'm so grateful for that moment. And that's when I started planning my exit. So your question was there anything else I could do? I think I exhausted everything. I talked to everyone I could think of. I got into therapy myself, back into therapy as a client, to try to work through it and just to own my part and see how I was triggered. And it wasn't helping. I talked to every colleague, smart people. Here's the situation. Here's what's happening. I tried everything. I talked to my supervisor. I tried talking to my colleague who was giving me all the trouble. I tried everything I could think of. I think I exhausted. I mean, sometimes I wonder, I don't know. I think it would have taken, you know, an inpatient program or like, you know, I would have had to be in so much therapy. It's not really doable in modern life. So really, and here's the other thing, Karen, I'm glad I left the job. Actually, I still miss it to some degree, but I think I would not have left. It had to be something massive. I feel like it was a message from the universe. Tom, you did that. You had your dream job for 7 years. Great. And there's some other stuff you could do in the world. Like how could I have see, after that, I got more into acting. I wouldn't have had time to get into acting with that job. I wouldn't have time to have written a book. I would not be able to go to California as much as there's all these things. Again, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
My life is different and in many ways better. So I wouldn't really want to do it. I feel like it happened as it needed to happen. And I'm quite okay with it for the most part. Every now and then, to be completely transparent, I still have a little resentment toward this person. I do. And I feel kind of embarrassed, and I do forgive the person. And still I get a little mad sometimes when I remember some of the crap that person pulled. Like, I'm human.
And, you know, I'm so glad that I asked you because about 10 years ago, I was working for a nonprofit college. Loved my job. Loved my students.
Yes.
Hated the culture of the college.
Yeah.
Now, when I began there, the culture was different.
Right.
I moved myself up by being wanting to learn more and more, being part of other departments because I just wanted to grow. I went back to college on my own and went for my master's degree.
Yeah.
Because I needed to fulfill me. And as I was fulfilling all these things, towards the end, I moved to a different campus. The campus was different. I sort of knew that going in. But I thought, but it's part of this big thing that the culture I'm familiar with should be there. And it wasn't. And I struggled. And my son was taking classes on the campus, and we were driving back and forth. And one night on the way home, he said, "Why are you so depressed, Mom?" And I said, "I'm not depressed. I'm tired." He goes, "No, you're depressed." And it was like, you don't have a degree to psychoanalyze me, so you're not going to tell me I'm depressed. But on this 25-minute ride home, he kept pushing at me.
Yeah.
And before I got out of the car at home, I was in tears. And we walked into the house, and he said, "You going to tell me now?" And it just all came out. I used to be able to do this. I used to be able to do that. Nobody appreciates me. And he saw it for himself on campus. And I sort of let it out. I felt better, went back to work. Next day, but I felt like I was just putting in time.
Right.
And to make a long story short, I finally went to HR with a list of things that I just knew weren't right. And HR looked at me and they said, "Why don't we put you on medical leave? You can have up to 12 weeks. Go take it. Go home, recuperate." And I looked at them like, "No, that's not what this is about." But then they insisted. So the end of that day, I went home because I was on medical leave. And 3 days later, I got a letter that said I had abandoned my job.
Come on.
So talk about depression. I was there. But my family, my husband and my son, allowed me to go through what I had to go through. I realized I could not go back to work there. I sought out a doctor. I went through the whole story, and they said, "You need some counseling, but you are absolutely right. Your brain is not going to let you go back." But yet my heart was hurting.
Yes.
I'm so glad I never went back.
Right.
Because if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have taken the steps to use my degree the way I really wanted to be able to reach out to other people.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of what I do in my podcast, I was doing in my office with prospective students.
Yeah.
Getting to know them. What is it you really want to do?
Right.
What stopped you in the past from doing it? Okay, this is what it's going to look like. Are you prepared? And I'll tell you, like you, there are days that I look back, I go, boy, if I could be back in my office. And, that paycheck was really, really good. Really enjoyed it.
Yes.
But it was my family, like your husband, who said, "You got to get out."
Yes. They know us. They knew you, and they told you the truth. I love that story.
So to our listeners, anybody can do it.
Yes.
Is it hard? I'm sure it was very hard for you.
Very hard.
Yeah.
Very hard. I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I loved so many activities at my work.
So you mentioned that you live in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
Here's another connection. I went to high school in Minneapolis. My family lived there for 4 years. And so I want people to know that the more you get to meet each other, you find commonality. I mean, as soon as you said that, it was like my favorite city.
You have fond memories.
I do. I have very fond memories. And I have to say that my graduating class has stayed together on Facebook, and we are all spread out, but it's like we're all sitting in that classroom every time we connect with each other. So I think that's great. So how do you get people to read the book and get their feelings out? Because I'm assuming that's what it is that as you read those stories, it's supposed to like hit us in the gut and say, "Hey, how can you connect?"
this may not exactly answer the question, but here, what comes to me is to say what I really learned from interviewing all these happy people, and from looking at my own life and all the people I personally know and all my clients over all these years. And it's three main things. Happier people connect really deeply with other people. They have a tribe, they have people they love, and it can be family by blood, but it doesn't have to be. Family
Sure.
of choice is just fine. They spend a lot of time with people they love and who love them back. Happier people connect really deeply with themselves as well. They know who they are, they honor their rhythms, they're mindful, they're in the present moment more, so they're not missing out on the richness of the ever-present now. You know, they're not worrying about things that haven't happened yet, or perseverating too much over things that came before. They also connect really deeply with their passions. They have activities they enjoy, adore, and do a ton of them. And by the way, this is something I wanted to highlight from earlier too. Like my own journey, if we look back, it was a lot about following my bliss, right? I got back into acting. I wanted to write. You wanted to do a podcast, right? You're following your bliss. So it may not be writing a book or doing interviews or being a podcaster for listeners,
Right.
whatever it is.
Exactly.
It may be like being with animals or gardening or children, or, you know, whatever your joy is, making music, playing football. I don't know. Do it. Just do it. So anyhow, back to the point is connecting with others, connecting with self, connecting with passions, particularly when we do those things in the service of others. That's a really key point too. Giving back, making the world better, contributing to the community. That's when people do those things. And I have 20 chapters in the book. There is a chapter on gratitude, on self-care, living in alignment with values, taking risks. But those are definitely the key lessons.
And, you know, I don't know about you, but I know growing up, I kept hearing this word about, you know, success.
Mm,
And success always seemed to be that person who got this college degree, this job, this paycheck, this car, this house. And I remember as a young child, my grandfather lived in a retirement home. And the retirement home, when it was built, was in a very beautiful neighborhood. And the neighborhood had decayed quite a bit, but the retirement home was still there. He was living there. But as we would drive, now my father drove just a plain old Chevy. Okay. No extras on it. It was
nothing
back,
fancy.
yeah. Back in those days, you could buy a bare bones car.
Yeah.
But as we drove into that neighborhood
Yeah.
of people who didn't have a lot of money, I saw Cadillacs in their driveways. And I remember asking my father, like, how come they can have a Cadillac and we can't? And my father said, some people need something shiny. So when they are away from their home, they appear successful. And to many people, it's the car they're driving, or it could be the outfit that they're wearing. Yeah. And as a young kid, it didn't connect. It was like, well, Dad, the next car you buy, I want it to be a Cadillac. And he just looked at me, no, it's never going to be a Cadillac. But now, as I've gotten older and I've gotten to meet other people and embrace them, I realize that I now understand why they were driving their Cadillacs. But I'm hoping our society can get a little less flashy, so to speak.
Yes.
And let us just be ourselves. You know, maybe you're driving, you know, an old Yugo that shouldn't even be on the street anymore. But
good old Yugos.
Hey,
yes.
It makes you feel good.
Yes.
And hopefully we won't be judged.
Yes.
And I think that's the important thing. We're the
Yeah.
only ones who can really judge ourselves.
Yes. And if Cadillacs are really your thing, go for it. Do the Cadillac thing up. But right, if it's just to impress people, right, the important thing. And by the way, I like your dad. I want to meet your dad. He may not even be around anymore. I don't know. But
My father always had these great insights. And I think it's funny because so many people looked up to him.
Mhm.
And I don't think he knew this during his life. To him, he was just this guy who could write, who could listen to the news and understand it, and then be able to have a real conversation about it. He wasn't just picking out a soundbite. He had some great talents, but he only had a high school education. And back in those days, that wasn't, unheard of. But he kept up with friends who were doctors, lawyers, because he was a confident man.
Yes.
So it took me a long time to learn his confidence. I'll tell you that. But now that I have it, I work at it every day.
Yeah.
It really makes me happy at the end of the day, even when there have been obstacles during the day that have made me think, well, I don't think I feel so happy right now. But then I've been able to climb around it or jump over it.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden there's that smile on our face again.
Yes. And don't they make you stronger? Here's the other thing. Again, less happy people, they want to avoid obstacles. You're like, okay, this obstacle came up, but I figured it out.
Yeah.
All right. And then it's like, right, then there's a boost, right? There's endorphins get released because like I accomplished something.
Absolutely. Well, how can we find your book?
Fullheartliving.com. There's a link right there. It is on Amazon, of course, if you're one of those Prime members or whatever. I do have a Facebook page. I'm not posting a lot lately. Same with Instagram. I just kind of occasionally post if I'm teaching a class or something, or like I do promote my podcast appearances.
Sure.
But I'm not super big on social media these days. But yeah, so the best way is fullheartliving.com, HERT in the middle there.
Well, I want everybody to get out to the website. We'll put all that information in the show notes. So if you say, I didn't get the website, well, just look in the show notes, everybody. You'll be able to select it, copy it, paste it, and get right to where Tom has all of his information. And again, thank you for joining me. And like I said, you're in one of my favorite cities. So go have some fun and enjoy the day.
I'll say hi to the lakes for you.
I appreciate that.
Thanks
Have
for
a great day.
having me here, Karen. You too.
Bye-bye now.